This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with Mindplay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I am very excited for another episode of the Literacy Mindset and my guest, Dr. Lisa Hill, who is the Director of Instruction at Canyon ISD up in the Amarillo area of Texas. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. Ready to dive in and talk about some important topics of instruction. I do think that it's interesting that your title is instruction, but I'm pretty sure you think about assessment. I think you think about professional development. So why don't you start with a little bit of orientation for the audience, your background, and kind of what it is that you're doing in Canyon right now.
Okay. My background is I've been in education for a little over 25 years. I started in a super small district, then came back to Amarillo, was in Amarillo for 16 years, and then now in Canyon since 2017. As the Director of Instruction, I oversee and work with anything that touches a teacher. That's kind of the best way to describe it. So when you think about instruction, it's that core instruction. So K-12, reading, math, science, social studies, assessments obviously happen in that.
Right.
Although we do have an assessment coordinator here in our district, or a director over assessment, and she does just that STAR assessment. I say just, that's a lot. STAR assessment, SAT, AP, those sorts of things. But when it comes to in-classroom assessment, that's me. So I work with teachers directly, and I have an instructional team that I work with. It's made up of three very intelligent women that I get to work with every day. So they do help me a lot.
Awesome.
So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. And we're going to dive into a number of different topics relative to that. Canyon, it covers a pretty large geography in Texas, right? I think you mentioned some massive number of square miles that could be covered. So would we describe it as a fairly rural district? Kind of give a size, around 10, 11,000 students. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we're at, well, it's funny, we just had a board meeting. So we're right at 11,400 students, and we're growing. We're a growing district. We butt up next to Amarillo ISD, which Amarillo ISD's service is 30,000, roughly 30,000 students.
Right.
But our district sits inside of Canyon, or inside of Amarillo city limits. So Amarillo shares two districts, if that makes sense.
The city of Amarillo, yep, okay.
The city of Amarillo itself. But we do extend a long way. We butt up against other rural school districts. Canyon itself is not considered rural because we are connected to Amarillo, and then West Texas A&M University is in Canyon. So if you're familiar with that part of the A&M system, so that is in Canyon. So.
Okay.
So we cover a big part, though.
Yeah, it has large geography, but mostly considered a suburban district. Cool. Well, let's see. Where do we begin as we talk about instruction and core instruction? So let's think about it this way. Maybe talk to us a little bit about how you think about the decision-making process. Let's start there. What does decision-making look like when you think about core reading programs or core ELA or RLA programs that you are instituting? What's the cycle look like? And how do you think about district-level decision-making versus what gets pushed out and allowed at a sort of a building-level decision-making process?
Well, I think we think about the vision of, like, what do we want our students to know when they leave us? Like, what do we want students to know when they leave us? That's our ultimate goal. And how successful do we want our students to be? But that's what we say, like, that's everybody's mission or vision. Right. But we have to think about that on a smaller scale to be able to say, what do we want kids to know at the end of every year that they move through our district? And then even break it down to the smaller scale of what do we want kids to be able to know at the end of each semester, at the end of each 6 weeks, at the end of each week, at the end of each day. So, and then how does that build that student that we want to get at the end of their, K-12 career. So when we look at that, we really look at all of the different things that are out there for literacy. I think we have 2 camps that are happening within our nation.
Right.
You have the science of teaching reading, and then you have the science of reading. And so, of course, in the state of Texas, we've initiated the science of teaching reading, which is through our Texas Reading Academies. So we do adhere to the science of teaching reading. We believe in what we would say is a structured approach. Kids need to be taught phonics, and they need to be taught comprehension. They need to be taught both of those things at one time. And we encompass that throughout our instructional process from K to 12. So looking at that, it's not just literacy, it encompasses everything for ELAR. We get a lot of people who are like, oh, you teach reading. And I think we forget literacy encompasses all of it. It encompasses reading, listening, speaking, writing. All of that is encompassing. So it's not just about, can the child read? Can the student read? Is the teacher teaching reading? But is the teacher also teaching the output of writing along with that process for our students? Because if a student can take it in their reading process, can they output that in their writing? We live today in a world where we have more writing than we've ever had in any other century of our lifetime. And we focus less on writing than anything else. And so, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's an interesting way of thinking about it. When you think about sort of the structure of literacy as you just described, is there one element of that is more challenging to instruct? Is it harder to teach reading than it is to teach writing? Is it harder to teach listening than it is to teach reading? Or are they pretty level? You just have to make sure that you give each one of them enough time.
I would say for me, I think it depends on the teacher. And I would say that teachers would probably say that teaching writing is harder because students are inundated with inappropriate language, inappropriate being misspelled, misarticulated, misappropriated, all of the misinformation when it comes to written skills. Yeah. So I would say that teachers would say that writing is harder to teach because it's a bigger lift. It's output of what you just input. So inputting reading, if you have all the right components, if you're teaching phonics, you're teaching oral language, and you're teaching comprehension, syllabication, all of those things, then you're going to produce a skilled reader. But to output all of the things that you just put in something that makes sense, something that's formidable, something that makes sense to someone else inputting it, that's difficult. So when you think about it in that cyclical process of not only do I have to teach the student how to input all of that and understand it and take it in, I also have to teach them how to put that out so another person can input it and still gain information that they needed in the way that I wanted them to perceive that information.
Right. No, that's true.
You're kind of looking at me kind of weird, Jeff.
Well, I have that look. People do tell me all the time, why are you looking at me weird? I don't know. It's just my face, I guess. But it's no, I'm reflecting on it and thinking about it, and it's making me go down a path that I didn't know that we were necessarily going to go down here. But as you think about writing being fundamentally a medium to which you can convey information, right? And over the last 12 to 18 months, there's been sort of this onslaught of AI and writing production that's happening, right? And so some may say that the skill of writing is less important today. Not the skill of conveying information, but the skill of actually writing all of the words, because you might be able to convey to a bot what information you want, and they can get all of the writing. Is that something that you guys talk about in the district, or where is it? Where does it sit today? As you think we're kind of going on this writing lens, and I want to stay there for a minute if we can.
Yeah, so I think that all districts have to come up with policy for AI and how they're going to use it in their classrooms. And I think we have to work with it. I don't think that we can work against it. Okay. But I come back to the statement that you made, which was, so the bot can write that for you. Well, if I don't know what it's supposed to look like, how am I going to know the bot's right? Because some human created the bot and I don't know. Does that make sense? And that AI will only produce what you put in it. So It won't make you sound smarter. It will produce the way that you articulate it to produce for you. Therefore, if your articulation is minimal or lacking, then whatever you put in there, it's going to produce that. And we are seeing that all the time. So if you think about it, if you went somewhere and someone was going to give you a presentation over something and they didn't have a lot of information, or that person didn't have a lot of knowledge about it, and they went to present that and they just put it in an AI platform and they produce that AI platform can only produce what that person knows and was able to articulate within the platform. So the platform
it might use bigger words than you're used to using, right? And it may be able to fill in some things that on the periphery you may think that it makes you sound smarter or that, but to the audience it's conveying potentially a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding because it's talking about it in a way that doesn't actually convey what you're trying to convey.
Okay. Absolutely. So you have to, and when you think about I really think about reading and writing together. When I think about literacy, I encompass reading and writing together. I think that you can't separate them. So I think about comprehension as, decoding words, phonics, phonemic awareness, all of those things is decoding. Encoding is the spelling. It's the output of that. So then when I think about comprehension, that input, when I'm reading that output is that written composition. So they're hand in hand. So if I don't have good comprehension, I'm not going to have good composition. You can tell I've taught a lot of kids in my life because it just, you encode it, you comprehend it, you composition it. And when we think about it in those terms, these are the conversations that myself and our teachers have, my instructional team and my teachers have, because this is what's important. This is what we have to know. This is where we get in that collaborative conversation and say, okay, we're going to teach students this to get here. What does their output look like? When a student reads to you, what else is their output? For me to really, truly understand, if they know what they read and they understand what they read, they can tell me, but can they write it down? If they can't write it down, then I have a missing component in their literacy function and in their literacy journey. So then I need to go back and fill that in for them. And what does that look like? So then that's those conversations that we get to.
That's interesting. And maybe we'll stay on a thread there for a second. How do you or your team, let's maybe think about it from an assessment standpoint. How do you value the difference between sort of an orally produced comprehension or understanding of something? Hey, tell me about what it is that you just read, versus answering, your classic multiple choice questions relative to context from the text, or you write me an essay about what it is that you learned on it. Like one of the things that we have in a component of our reading studio is sort of an oral fluency, but you get to retell the story, like tell us what it is that you learned. So it's just one other way that we have it, but I'm interested to hear how you guys think about that as an assessment.
Well, I try to think about, Donald Murray says writing is the first draft, or conversation is the first draft. So oral language is the first draft of writing. So that lets me know a student has the comprehension, they have that ability. My question would come back and ask, did the student read the text, or was the text read to a student? Because now my comprehension that I'm assessing is different.
Listening, right.
Listening comprehension varied over reading comprehension. I think oral storytelling and oral retelling is the most important thing that we can do, because then we can hold that information and we're retelling the entirety of the text.
Right.
Whereas if I'm limited
Multiple
to
choice is
questions,
isolated parts of the text.
those are isolated skills that I can isolate as a teacher. But did the student truly get everything that was there? So I think that it's not one assessment. I think it's a multitude of assessments over different things and at different times. And I think our teachers, those are the conversations, because as a teacher, you are assessing your students all the time. It's important. Right. You're listening to them, you're watching them, you're conferring with them as they're writing, you're asking them questions as they read. So it's not this one assessment. I would love it to be this one assessment, this one time, and I know everything about you. Know. Yeah, it's just because reading is not innate. Reading is a taught skill. So it's not as straightforward. And math teachers would disagree with me. Math becomes a little more straightforward where the computation, you can do it. Reading is, Scarborough's reading rope, it's a rope. Right. And it's a rope for a reason, and they're interconnected. And when you think about reading as a whole person, you're not the same reader today, Jeff, that you were when you graduated high school, I hope.
I hope as well, but thank you for pointing that out.
Right. And so your reading comprehension continues to build as you age and as you read. Right. It's not a skill that stops. It's a skill that continues to go. Same as your conversation skills, or if you're a runner and your running skills, or if you were, an artist in the way that you could, create something, some piece of art. I think that we look at it as a standalone skill sometimes when it's not that. It's a continued process that never ends unless you stop practicing that skill at a different level.
Okay. So
does that make sense?
Yeah, it did. I'm kind of internalizing it here. So how does that affect how you and your team put together instructional components inside of grades that transition from, like, how do you guys use that knowledge in your instructional methodology?
Yeah, so we do. We really hold tight to, what the state of Texas asks us to do with our students. And so we look at that, and we really help our teachers understand that we have to teach what the state's asking our students to know at that level. Because if we don't hold our students to that level, our students can't progress to the next level when they get there. And then if we do have a student who's falling short, we need to know where that student's gap is. And that's where we work closely with our intervention team and our intervention department to be able to say, hey, this is where a student has a gap. How are we going to best fill that? So we move from that tier 1 instruction of this is grade level material. This is what students need to be able to do here. And we know none of these skills are mastered, but we're looking for mastery of the skill at that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so then, you can hit a mastery level. That doesn't mean it's completely mastered yet. Got it.
Right. So then work within that tier 2 intervention to figure out what is the student missing that's keeping them from moving to the next level. Is it decoding? So then that becomes a very specialized intervention for that student. And it's not when we move a student into tier 2 or to tier 3 for whatever that student needs.
Sure.
It's very individualized. It's not, they come here and they everybody gets the same thing. Not everybody needs the same thing. Everybody needs the same skills to be a skilled reader, but not everybody needs them at the same rate.
Right.
And if you have a gap, you have a different gap than somebody else. So we've got to figure out how to fill that gap for those students and use whatever is necessary to fill that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, let's push on that for a second, because it is an interesting dichotomy, I think, that exists. Like we just talked about core curriculum. You have, like, the essence of core curriculum is to bring a cohort across 180 days of instruction. Like, hey, here's our scope and sequence, and here's where we're going to be. And literally, the train leaves the station every day, right? It's like, whoop, this is what we're doing. But for the most part, we pretty much understand that students acquire skills at different rates. Some of them may pick something up here, not there, which is why we've introduced tier 2 and tier 3 in instruction. And it's funny because you just described how individualized tier 2 and tier 3 can be. And I lament, obviously, on the software side of the world, we love personalization. Like for us, like that's one of the things that we get to do is like, how do we make this instruction even more personalized? But on the core side, it's almost like you can't make it too personalized, because how do you bring a cohort along in an overly personalized way? Is that something that you wrestle with a little bit? Like how do we make this personal or individual to the student, while at the same time knowing I got a third grade classroom that I got to get to at the end of the 180-day schedule?
Yeah, I would say that's the hardest thing, is that you have 28 kids sitting in front of you, and they're not all reading at the same rate. They don't all have comprehension at the same level. So as a classroom teacher, that's the hardest thing is, okay, I need all of these students here by this time. And we set that time limit. And that can be different for different grade levels based on cognition and ability to move. So I really talk to teachers, and my team really talks to teachers about, we instruct at that level. So whatever level you're at, let's say you're at fourth grade level, we're going to instruct at fourth grade level. Like that's where we need to be.
Yep.
I know, because I've been a teacher for a long time, I'm going to have kids below that level. It's just going to happen. So how do I reach those kids, and how do I make sure that they are getting what they need? So I have to alter what they get in that tier 1 so that they're successful. So not everybody gets, that fourth grade. They may not all get that fourth grade text or whatever that is that I'm using that day. They may need to get something that we used in third grade. They may need to get a text that's at a little bit lower lexile level for them, so that they can practice the skill that they need to practice, but they are still reading and independent with that and are successful. Because if they can't read the material and they can't lift the words off the page and understand them, they can't practice any reading skills. That's hard. That's hard. Like you have 28 kids in front of you. You have 20 kids in front of you. You have 3 kids in front of you who all have something different and all read at a different rate, a different pace, and they comprehend differently. Yeah. How are you going to get them all there? Okay.
Yeah. And well, when we were talking, preparing for this, you sort of mentioned autonomy as a critical component for teachers. Can you talk a little bit about maybe where that would come into play in this situation?
Yeah, we talked about it. I just want to clarify that for me, autonomy is the way a lesson is delivered.
Okay.
It's not what's taught, it's how we teach it. Okay. So it's really important that we use professional development, or we use instructional coaching, or we use leadership development to help teachers understand some of the best practices and best ways to deliver instruction for students. We have some amazing teachers in our district, and they are phenomenal instructors. And that's just something that they know how to do. And that's where autonomy happens. And sometimes I'll watch a teacher teach a lesson and I think, I would really like to duplicate that. But I can't, because it's their way of delivering it. It's their understanding. And so I think about that because I do get the joy of working with all of our first year teachers in our district. And I mean, I'm telling you, it is a joy. It's one of the greatest things about my job, besides kids and teachers. But thinking about a first year teacher delivering a lesson next to a teacher who's been teaching for 20 years, deliver a reading lesson, that looks real different. Yes, and it doesn't matter.
I'm sure it does.
It doesn't matter if they're reading or they have a lesson in front of them. It's the understanding of the students' internalization as well as the teachers' internalization of what's being taught and what's being learned.
Hmm.
You don't get that by just reading words on a page for a student. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I have script and I read it and I don't understand where that's falling or how kids are internalizing that or making it their own, then I miss the mark for my students. Whereas a veteran teacher knows that content because he or she's been working with it for a long time, and they
Right.
know where students are going to miss. They know before they teach it what's going to happen.
Right.
Where them and you could have a veteran teacher who may not know that, who may not have ever had that, or who may be a veteran teacher who's now teaching second graders and she's always taught sixth graders, or she, those are different kids. They're
Right.
kids, but they're different. They have different needs. So when you think about it in that term, it's not a very good answer, Jeff. Sorry. That one's a hard one.
It's a thoughtful one though, and I think it's something we have to keep pushing on, because I believe that there is a promising future in the world in which we can get more personal, more personalized, and that technology will help us do that. I think we have some ways to go, and in some ways we made good progress. There's some really personal things that can happen, and we have to think about it. But let's dive into that topic where you just talked about for a second. Let's talk about a sixth grade teacher, sixth, seventh, eighth grade teacher that has students in their classroom that need decoding skills, that have phonics gaps there. How do you support them? Because especially if they're secondary licensed, they're an ELA sixth grade ELA teacher. They're like, I don't know how to teach phonics. It's not something that I learned how to do. How do you support them? What does PD look like for that? How do you think about that?
Well, it's weird that you asked that. We go to PLC, we sit with them, we work with them, we PD them in a way that may be different than other districts.
Okay.
The Texas Reading Academies, TEA offered up Texas Reading Academies and said it's mandatory for K to 3.
Right.
That's fantastic. They need it. It's so good. We came to a decision in our district about 3 years ago that wasn't enough. And we needed our K5 and K6 teachers needed this because we have kiddos who can't do it. And what we knew was that that fifth grade teachers and sixth grade teachers don't get phonics instruction when they're at the college level.
Getting certified.
They don't get it. So we made a decision as a district and said, let's make sure that all of our fifth and sixth grade teachers go through this who teach RLA, so they get that instruction at that lower level. Then we made another decision, and we said, let's open that up for any seventh and eighth grade RLA teacher who wants to do it. And it was last year, I believe, we had four, and we have 3 junior highs. So we had 4 of our 7th and 8th grade English teachers went through reading academies to understand how to teach decoding and encoding and comprehension. So that was remarkable to me that they would give up that much of their time, not get paid for that, lose that much classroom instruction time. We kind of spread it out. So over the summer, both summers for our teachers. So they only really miss 4 days a year, 5 days out of their classroom. And it was remarkable. They really just were like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Right.
I didn't know that. So now we feel like we've given them a baseline to start. And then we do a follow-up, and all of those teachers get coaching with our instructional coaches. They go in, watch their lessons, coach them. We have open dialogue. We try to be very consistent and be very collaborative within our district, as far as if you need help, you ask and it will be given. And that's really just kind of how I think about things.
I love that.
Like if you ask me, I'm going to come. And if I can't get there, ask me, and one of the instructional coaches will get there, and we will get there and we will help you. And we may not have the answer, but together we'll figure it out.
That's awesome. I don't know that all of your teachers understand the level of support that they're getting by a leader like that, but that's fantastic to hear. Well, we could take so much more time talking about this and diving in, but we'll wrap here with a classic crystal ball question. We've talked about some of the challenges. We've talked about some great things that you're doing relative to the professional development side of the world. But as you look 5 to 10 years down the road, what do you see as something that needs to stay the same, or that you think will stay the same and that will be great, or something that you think will stay the same and shouldn't? You sure would like to see it change? Just give us some insight into kind of, you've been doing this for a long time, just over 25 years is what you said, just over, like 25 and like, I don't know, a third or something like that. But
25 and some change.
Yeah, and some change. So what does it look like in the Dr. Hill lens?
Retirement. No, I'm just kidding.
So good.
What needs to change?
Okay.
Like I want the expectation to be there.
Okay.
For kids to read and write. But I want the expectation to be for kids to read and write. I don't want the expectation to just be for kids to read. It's not enough. We've got to have the other part. I think it's Donald Miller who says, reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out. So when I think about it in those terms, where is our world going to be if we don't have good writers? Because writing is thinking, and it's thinking on paper, and it's thinking out loud, or it's thinking on a MacBook or whatever.
Right.
And I think about the writers of the Declaration of Independence, and wow, what an incredible document they crafted. So the language was important, and they understood the language, because it's hard to dissect it and to not understand it. So I think about that, and I think about that correlation. So that would be something that I want the expectation to stay there, but I want the conversation to broaden. And I want to talk about literacy as a whole. And I want to talk about it as a culture and as a society, and where we are and what we're growing into be, and how does AI play into that. And I think about, I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote the book, The Shallows, What the Internet's Doing to Your Brain. And I just have been revisiting it over the past few months just with AI. And I think, okay, this is what he said in 2010, 2012. And here's where we are now. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I need that to be all encompassing. I need literacy to be all encompassing. I don't need it to just be reading. I need it to be both things.
Got it.
And then what was the other question? What
would you say shouldn't change?
Shouldn't change? Our love for teachers shouldn't change.
The human element.
Ability, and our ability to know that they deserve more, and they deserve more recognition and more time, and just to be trusted, I think, as individuals for what they do every day. It's hard. They have a hard job.
It's a hard job. I love it. Well, if we can go to a more complete view of literacy with reading and writing, and understanding that it's important to breathe in and breathe out, I think we'll get ourselves to a better place, especially if we continue to appreciate and show the value of teachers. So thank you so much, Dr. Lisa Hill, for joining me today. Hopefully we have the chance to do this again soon.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.